How screwed are we? That depends on who we are. And if you mean the species, I would say now there is one human species, but, we decimated a number of intelligent hominids in our past. For most of human history, we have not regarded ourselves as a single unified entity. The enormous gap in access and availability of certain resources and conveniences leads some people to think that we're actually talking about, that we've already kind of undergone something like a shadow speciation, especially if you think about certain definitions of species that base the categorization not on anatomical features, but on the willingness to reproduce in laboratory environments. Even then, I would say that I think humankind is very likely to live through even the worst case scenarios that people seem keen on forecasting. On the other hand, I think the sort of modernist, humanist idea, humankind has always been on somewhat rather tenuous footing. I like to maintain that we are going to find new ways to pull it together, and not just find better ways of identifying as a species, but find better ways of communicating interspecies, with others. A big piece of the pushback against evolutionary thinking was because it attacked the idea of the human as an ontological category, emergent and processual, and we can't really ask how screwed are we without first asking the question of how well can we identify with the other, because if we regard ourselves as separate from the rest of the living world, we're part of the problem. But regarding people who see themselves as separate from the living world as a problem, a tumor to be, irradiated or whatever, is also part of the problem. We're not seeing evolution operating only on individuals or only on genes. These are somewhat arbitrary partitions of information flowing through environments or, through time and space. The same applies to cybernetic considerations where you're asking, where decisions are and are not being made. Natural selection is something that people do, right? This whole thing started as a question of animal breeding. Humans are, up until very recently, humans were not actually generating the mutations that they were selecting from. You can see animal husbandry as a kind of prototypical instance of a human on-the-loop process where, we see a variety of options and we're saying no as much as we're, it's like the question of are we saying yes to the propagation of certain breeds? It's I think that, my emphasis on the loop over in or out of is an attempt to bridge the perspectives of people who feel like they are completely out of control in these incredibly vast and opaque and, multi-dimensional technological infrastructures that we find ourselves, and also sort of popping the balloon of tech barons who are, in one sense, validly recognizing themselves to be some of the most highly agentic entities that have ever existed on the planet, completely incapable of actually controlling civilization or controlling the biosphere. Bill Thompson used to talk about the entelechy of human being defined fundamentally as a permacultural guild or consortium of animal, vegetal, and mineral intelligences. And so, me sitting here with my laptop computer surrounded by houseplants, is the unit. That's the self that we're operating at here. And so, like, how do we teach people to wield power that's sort of beyond the scope of individual understanding in a modernist sense, responsibly? Like, a part of it is this question of, like, how collective intelligence comes into the foreground. Esoteric cultures that are suitable for an age of generative AI, or what, again, what K. Olado McDowell calls more broadly neural media, which would include, like, brain-machine interfaces and so on. That, like, we get somewhere by accepting Arthur C. Clarke's third law that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, and then asking the question that rationalists don't really seem to enjoy, which is, where is magical thinking useful in the digital meta-modern or meta-industrial environment? Frederick Hodelin said poetry is the beginning and end of all scientific knowledge. And it's like, well, we are, it's becoming more and more evident that, we are, our technologies are these networks of semantic associations, like latent spaces of statistical correlations, which is very much based on and reflective of the way that our own brains work. So, magic and myth, the ability to cut paths through that thicket of associations and encode them in narrative structure are prerequisite for the derivation of causal mechanistic frameworks in science. And then science itself gestures toward, levels of complexity that it's constantly breaking itself against the rock of, complexity that exceeds our ability to cognize or to narrativize. So, like, I'm excited that we might basically, that I get to play some small part in the formation of cultural norms and of relationships whereby, Primavera de Filippi calls the extitution, which is, not an institution in the classical sense, but, groups of people that come together out of a sense of, affinity or a sense of shared possibility. We find better ways of moving through highly automated, incredibly powerful technological environments with the integrated insights of the hermetic traditions and the full inheritance of our highly plural wisdom. What I'm excited about is seeing how trans rationality takes root in built wilderness populated by strange machinic intelligences and augmented humans and people in communication with the, entire ecosystems, various kinds of non-human intelligence. Deliberately choosing to inhibit some sort of response that has been proposed by an autonomic process elsewhere in the body. If you have, like, unusually strong executive function, this is kind of a weird example, tantric practices of retention, or just simply, like, Buddhist unattachment, from, like, I'm not going to react to this